I buried my husband alone while my entire family was having a wine party in my sister's backyard. But when they saw who walked up behind me at that gate, the laughter died instantly, and my mother dropped her glass. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. 3 weeks ago, I lost the love of my life in a car accident that turned my world upside down. But the real betrayal came on the day of his memorial service, when I discovered just how little my own blood family actually cared about me. Let me introduce you to the people in this story, because understanding who they are makes what happened even more shocking. First, there's my husband, David Mitchell. He was 36 years old, a devoted father to our 2 children, Emma, who's 8, and Luke, who's 6. David worked as a project manager for a construction company, but more than that, he was the kind of man who would shovel our elderly neighbor's driveway without being asked, and who never missed one of Emma's soccer games or Luke's school plays. He wasn't perfect, but he loved us fiercely, and he treated my family with nothing but respect and kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. Then there's my mother, Patricia Coleman, though everyone calls her Pat. She's 58 years old and has always had this way of making everything about her. Growing up, I learned that Pat's approval came with conditions, and those conditions usually involved putting my sister Jessica first. Pat works as a bank teller and lives in this constant state of being either offended by something or planning her next dramatic reaction to whatever she perceives as a slight against her. Speaking of Jessica, she's my younger sister by 3 years. Jessica Coleman Barnes married into money when she wed Ryan Barnes, a successful businessman who owns several car dealerships. Ever since that wedding 5 years ago, Jessica has acted like she's somehow elevated above the rest of us. She lives in this gorgeous house with a pool and throws these elaborate parties that she posts all over social media. Jessica has always been Pat's favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the responsible one who was expected to just handle everything quietly. My father, Robert Coleman, we call him Bob, is 60 years old, and honestly, he's just along for the ride most of the time. Bob retired from his job at the post office 2 years ago, and now he spends his days following Pat around and agreeing with whatever she says to keep the peace. He's not a bad man, just a weak one, who learned long ago that life is easier when he doesn't rock the boat. There's also my Uncle Michael, Pat's younger brother. He's 55 and usually tries to be the family peacemaker. Michael owns a small plumbing business and has always been the one to smooth things over when family tensions get high. I actually thought he might be the voice of reason during all of this, which makes what happened even more painful. Now, David had his own family drama that becomes important later in this story. His brother Marcus Mitchell is 38 and used to be David's business partner until a deal went wrong 5 years ago. Marcus accused David of cheating him out of money. David said Marcus was trying to cut corners that would have hurt their clients. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but the fight destroyed their relationship. Marcus moved across the country, and we hadn't heard from him since. David tried reaching out several times over the years, especially after Emma and Luke were born, because he wanted his brother to know his children. But Marcus never responded. So when David died in that car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning, I was left to navigate not just my own crushing grief, but also the needs of 2 confused, heartbroken children who couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. I had funeral arrangements to make, insurance companies to call, and a million decisions to handle while feeling like I was drowning. But I wasn't worried about handling it alone, because I had family. Or at least, I thought I did. What I discovered 3 weeks later would change everything I believed about the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The 3 weeks between David's death and his memorial service were the darkest of my life. I remember sitting in our kitchen at 2 a.m, surrounded by stacks of paperwork that seemed to multiply every time I looked away. Death certificates, insurance claims, bank account transfers. Apparently, when someone dies, the world demands proof of everything in triplicate before they'll let you grieve. Emma kept asking me why Daddy's pillow still smelled like his cologne, and Luke had started sleeping with David's old baseball glove because he said it made him feel safe. I was trying to hold these 2 broken little hearts together while mine was completely shattered. Some nights, after I'd finally gotten them to sleep, I'd sit in David's closet just breathing in the scent of his shirts, wondering how I was supposed to do this alone. But I wasn't supposed to be alone, right? That's what family is for. The first red flag should have been my mother's reaction when I called to tell her about the accident. Pat's immediate response wasn't, "Oh my God, are you okay?" or "What can I do to help?" It was, "Well, I hope his life insurance is good because you're going to need it." Then she started going on about how she'd always worried that David drove too fast, which wasn't even true. David was the most careful driver I knew, always checking his mirrors twice and never speeding when the kids were in the car. When I asked if she could help me with some of the funeral arrangements, Pat said she was too emotional to be of much use. She claimed that planning funerals gave her panic attacks ever since her own mother died 15 years ago. I understood grief affects people differently, so I didn't push. Jessica's excuses were even more elaborate. She had this big presentation at work that she absolutely couldn't reschedule, even though I knew she worked in marketing for a local restaurant chain, not exactly life or death stuff. When I suggested she could at least help me write David's obituary since she was always good with words, she said she was just too busy with everything right now, but that she'd try to make time for the actual service. My father Bob just echoed whatever Pat said, which was typical. "Your mother knows best about these things, Sarah. Just focus on you and the kids." Uncle Michael did offer to help, but when I called him back to take him up on it, Pat had apparently gotten to him first. He suddenly had plumbing emergencies that would keep him tied up all week, so I planned everything myself. I chose Riverside Memorial Gardens because David loved being near the water, and they had this beautiful oak tree where we could hold the service. I wrote his obituary at midnight while the kids slept, trying to capture 36 years of life in 3 paragraphs. I picked out flowers, white lilies, because they were his favorite. I even made a photo slideshow of our life together, staying up until dawn going through old pictures that made me cry so hard I could barely see the computer screen. The morning of the memorial service was gray and cold, one of those October days where the sky looks like it's pressing down on you. I spent an hour getting Emma and Luke dressed in the little black outfits I'd bought them, trying to explain why today was important while they complained about their uncomfortable shoes. "Will Grandma Pat be there?" Emma asked as I braided her hair. "Of course she will, sweetheart. The whole family will be there to say goodbye to Daddy." Luke looked up at me with those big eyes that are exactly like David's. "Will they tell stories about Daddy like you do?" "I'm sure they will, baby. Everyone loved Daddy." As I loaded them into the car, I felt this mix of dread and hope. Dread because I knew this would be the hardest day of my life, but hope because I truly believed that when it mattered most, my family would show up. They had to show up. This was David's memorial service. This was about supporting me and the children through the worst moment of our lives. I drove to Riverside Memorial Gardens, actually feeling grateful that at least I wouldn't have to face this completely alone. My family might not have helped with the planning, but they'd be there when it counted. I had no idea how wrong I was about to be. We arrived at Riverside Memorial Gardens 15 minutes early, and I spent those minutes scanning the parking lot for familiar cars. No silver Honda, no blue sedan, no pickup truck, but I told myself they were probably running late. Pat was always running late, and maybe they were all driving together. The funeral director, Mr. Henderson, approached me with that practiced sympathy smile they must teach in funeral director school. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have about 30 people here now. Would you like to wait a few more minutes for the rest of your family to arrive?" "Yes, please," I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. "They should be here any minute." Emma tugged on my black dress. "Mommy, where's Grandma Pat? She promised she'd bring me the butterfly pin that belonged to Great-Grandma." "She'll be here soon, sweetheart. Maybe she just hit traffic." But as the minutes ticked by, I started recognizing a horrible truth. The people gathering under that beautiful oak tree were David's co-workers from the construction company, his boss Mike, his work buddy Tony, who used to come over for barbecues, the receptionist Janet, who always remembered the kids' birthdays. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was there with her husband, and David's old college room. Mate had driven 3 hours to be there, but not one person from my family had shown up. Mr. Henderson approached again at exactly 2 p.m. "Mrs. Mitchell, should we begin the service?" I looked around desperately one more time. Maybe they were walking from a farther parking spot. Maybe Pat had car trouble, and they were all figuring out rides. Maybe Uncle Michael's plumbing emergency had run long, but they were on their way. "Yes," I whispered. "Let's start." Standing at that makeshift podium, looking out at the small crowd of people who had actually cared enough to come, I felt this burning shame wash over me. Not shame about David. Everyone here loved him. Shame that my own family had abandoned me so completely that strangers were showing me more respect than my own mother. I started reading David's eulogy, but halfway through, my voice cracked when I got to the part about how much he loved family gatherings. Because David had loved my family, even when they didn't deserve it. He'd spent every Christmas morning making pancakes for everyone when they came over. He'd helped my father fix his car multiple times. He'd even lent Jessica and Ryan money for their house down payment, money they still hadn't paid back. Luke started crying during the eulogy, not the quiet sniffles of a grieving child, but the loud, confused wails of a 6-year-old who didn't understand why this was happening. Emma tried to comfort him, but she started crying too, and suddenly I was trying to finish this speech while my children fell apart and my family was nowhere to be found. After the service, David's boss, Mike, came up to me. "Sarah, that was beautiful. David would have been so proud. Where's your family today?" I felt my cheeks burn. They had some conflicts come up at the last minute, but Tony overheard and shook his head. "Man, that's rough. I know David always talked about your mom and sister. He was always trying to include them in stuff." The drive home was silent except for Emma's quiet questions. "Mommy, why didn't anyone from our family come say goodbye to Daddy?" "Sometimes adults make bad choices, honey." "But Grandma Pat loves us, right? She always says she does." I didn't know how to answer that. I was starting to wonder if Pat had ever really loved us, or if she just loved the idea of being needed. As we turned onto our street, that's when I saw them. Pat's silver Honda parked on Maple Street 3 blocks away, my father's blue sedan right behind it, Uncle Michael's pickup truck with the dented tailgate. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. They were here in the neighborhood. They had been here the whole time. That's when I heard it. Faint music and laughter coming from the direction of Jessica's house. The same Jessica who was too busy with work to help me plan her brother-in-law's memorial service. I pulled into our driveway and told Emma and Luke to wait in the car. My legs felt unsteady as I walked toward that sound, toward the truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. "Stay in the car, babies. Mommy needs to check on something. I'll be right back." Emma looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Are you okay, Mommy? You look angry." I wasn't just angry, I was beyond angry. I was in that dangerous place where grief and rage collide and create something explosive. But I couldn't let my children see that, not today. They'd been through enough. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just lock the doors and don't get out until I come back, okay?" The 3-block walk to Jessica's house felt like the longest walk of my life. With every step, the laughter got louder. The music got clearer. Some upbeat pop song that felt like a slap in the face after the solemnity of David's memorial service. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, mixing with the sound of my heels clicking on the sidewalk. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe they'd had their own little memorial for David, and this was just how they processed grief. Maybe they'd been too emotional to come to the public service, but wanted to honor him privately. Maybe the timing was just a horrible coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate. They had all made conscious choices to skip David's memorial and do this instead. As I got closer to Jessica's backyard gate, I could hear voices more clearly. Pat's distinctive laugh, the one she did when she thought she was being particularly clever. Bob's low chuckle in response to something, the clink of glasses. I stopped at the corner of Jessica's fence, hidden in the shadow of her neighbor's oak tree, and peered through the gaps in the wooden slats. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was my entire family spread out on Jessica's expensive patio furniture like they were having the time of their lives. Pat was lounging in a wicker chair with a wine glass in her hand, gesturing dramatically while she told some story. Bob was, standing by Jessica's outdoor bar, mixing himself another drink. Uncle Michael was laughing at whatever Pat was saying, slapping his knee like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And Jessica Jessica was taking selfies, actual selfies with her wine glass, posing like she was at some glamorous party instead of deliberately missing her brother-in-law's memorial service. But then I saw someone else walk through Jessica's sliding back door, carrying a bottle of champagne, and my world tilted completely off its axis. Marcus Mitchell, David's estranged brother. The man who had cut David out of his life 5 years ago and never looked back. The man who had refused to return David's calls or meet his own niece and nephew. The man who had missed every birthday, every Christmas, every attempt David had made to rebuild their relationship. Marcus was here, at my sister's house, on the day of David's memorial service, with champagne. I watched in horror as my family welcomed him like some kind of returning hero. Pat actually got up to give him a hug. Uncle Michael shook his hand enthusiastically. Jessica raised her wine glass in what looked like a toast. This wasn't grief processing. This wasn't a coincidence. This was planned. This was intentional. And Marcus's presence meant it was something much worse than I could have imagined. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and checked the time. 4:30 p.m. We'd finished David's memorial service barely 2 hours ago, and here they all were, celebrating something with the one person who had hurt David more than anyone else in the world. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically sick. But alongside the nausea came something else, a cold, crystal-clear determination. I needed to know what they were celebrating. I needed to hear what they were saying. And then I needed to confront them with the truth of what they'd done. I crept closer to the gate, staying in the shadows until I could hear every word they were saying. What I heard next would change everything I thought I knew about the people who had raised me. I pressed myself against the fence, my heart hammering as I strained to hear every word. What I heard in the next few minutes destroyed any remaining illusions I had about my family. Marcus was in the middle of raising his champagne bottle. Here's to freedom, everyone. After 5 years of that bastard blocking me from everything that should have been mine, justice finally caught up with him. My mother, my own mother, clinked her wine glass against his bottle. About time, honestly. David always acted like he was better than the rest of us, always had Sarah thinking she was too good for her own family. Pat, you're terrible. Jessica laughed, but she was raising her glass too. But you're not wrong. Sarah's been insufferable ever since she married him. Remember how she used to lecture us about family values and being there for each other? Well, where's her precious husband now? I felt bile rising in my throat. They were talking about David, kind, gentle David who had never said a harsh word about any of them, like he was their enemy. Marcus took a long drink of champagne. You know what the best part is? That construction business partnership I had with David? The one he supposedly stole from me? Well, turns out when one partner dies, the surviving partner gets everything. I've already talked to the lawyers. All those contracts, all that equipment, all those client relationships, they're mine now. Uncle Michael, who I'd thought was the family peacekeeper, was nodding approvingly. Smart thinking, Marcus. David never did appreciate what he had. My father, my passive, weak father, finally spoke up. What about Sarah and the kids? Don't they get something? Pat waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Bob, Sarah will be fine. She's got that life insurance money, and honestly, this might be the wake-up call she needs. Maybe now she'll stop acting like she's above us and remember where she came from. Plus, Jessica added with a smirk, maybe now she'll actually need us for something. She's been so independent and self-righteous since she got married. Well, let's see how independent she is as a single mother. Marcus laughed coldly. The irony is beautiful. David spent 5 years trying to keep me away from the business, claiming I was unethical and cut corners. Well, guess who gets the last laugh? I'm about to inherit everything he worked for, and there's nothing his precious widow can do about it. That's when something inside me snapped completely. These people, these monsters wearing the faces of my family, were celebrating my husband's death like it was Christmas morning. They had deliberately skipped his memorial service to throw a party with the one person who had caused David years of pain. I stepped out of the shadows and quietly opened Jessica's backyard gate. For a moment, I just stood there in the entrance, watching them toast my husband's death while their own backs were turned to me. Then I cleared my throat. The effect was instantaneous and beautiful. Pat's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the concrete patio, sending red wine splashing across her white pants. Jessica went so pale I thought she might faint. Uncle Michael started choking on his drink. My father dropped his burger and just stared at me, with his mouth hanging open. Marcus, however, was too drunk on champagne and victory to read the room. He turned around with a grin still on his face. Well, if it isn't the grieving widow. How was the funeral, Sarah? Sorry we couldn't make it, but as you can see, we had more important things to celebrate. My voice, when it came out, was deadly calm. Don't let me interrupt the party. I just came from burying my husband alone while you were all here celebrating his death with the brother who spent 5 years trying to destroy him. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus finally seemed to realize he'd revealed too much. But I wasn't finished, not even close. The silence stretched for what felt like forever before Pat finally found her voice, scrambling for damage control. Sarah, honey, this isn't what it looks like. We were having our own little memorial for David. We were too emotional to come to the public service, but we wanted to honor him in our own way. I looked at the champagne bottle in Marcus's hand, at the selfie Jessica had been taking, at the shattered wine glass that moments ago had been raised in a toast to my husband's death. By toasting with the man who tried to destroy him? By celebrating that he's finally out of your way? By planning to steal his business while his body is barely cold in the ground? Marcus, still too arrogant to back down, stepped forward. Steal? I'm not stealing anything. That business was always half mine, and now that David's gone, I'm just claiming what's rightfully mine. Your husband was a self-righteous fool who thought he could cut me out permanently. Marcus, shut up, Jessica hissed, finally understanding how bad this looked. But I was done with their lies and their damage control. No, let him talk. Let him explain to my children someday why their uncle celebrated their father's death. Let him explain why their own grandmother chose a party over their daddy's memorial service. That's when I delivered the blow that made all their scheming worthless. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to call those lawyers again, because David wasn't just smart about business, he was smart about protecting his family. Everything. The business, the equipment, the client contracts, the life insurance, it all goes to me and the children. Your name isn't on a single document. David made sure of that years ago when you first threatened him. The color drained from Marcus's face. That's impossible. I was his business partner. Were, past tense. David bought out your share and removed you from everything the month after your last fight. He kept it quiet because he hoped you'd come around someday. But legally, you have no claim to anything. I watched Marcus realize that his celebration was premature, that his 5-year grudge had cost him everything, that he'd destroyed his relationship with his brother for nothing. But I wasn't done. I turned to my family, my former family. As for the rest of you, congratulations. You got what you wanted. I'm finally out of your lives. Don't call me, don't text me, don't send birthday cards to my children. You're strangers to us now. I walked away from that backyard knowing I would never speak to any of them again. I collected Emma and Luke from the car, and instead of going home, I drove straight to David's parents' house across town. Margaret and Robert Mitchell, David's real family, had been begging to help, but I'd been so focused on getting support from my own family that I'd barely leaned on them. When Margaret opened the door and saw my tear-streaked face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me and the children inside and held us while we fell apart. 6 months later, my life looks completely different. David's parents helped me move to a new neighborhood, closer to them. Emma and Luke are thriving with grandparents who actually show up to soccer games and school plays. Margaret takes them for sleepovers every Friday so I can have time to heal. And Robert has become the grandfather figure they need, teaching Luke to throw a baseball and helping Emma with her science projects. The final twist? Marcus's premature celebration cost him more than just the business. When word got out in their industry about what he'd done, celebrating his brother's death to steal his company, no one would work with him. His reputation was destroyed. He moved back across the country with nothing. As for my family, they've tried reaching out multiple times, especially after they realized the size of David's life insurance policy. Pat has sent dozens of texts claiming she misunderstood what happened. Jessica has left voicemails crying about how she never meant for things to go this far. Uncle Michael showed up at my old house, but the new owners told him we'd moved without leaving a forwarding address. Here's what I learned from the worst day of my life. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't your real family. Real family shows up when you need them most, not when you're useful to them. The people who mattered were there at David's memorial service. His co-workers who respected him, neighbors who cared about us, friends who drove hours to say goodbye. Every Sunday, Emma, Luke, and I visit David's grave with Margaret and Robert. We bring fresh flowers and tell him about our week. We've created new traditions that honor his memory instead of chasing approval from people who never deserved our loyalty. That memorial service taught me who truly loved David and who truly loves me and my children. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most beautiful discoveries about where you really belong. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family relationships, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever discovered that the people you thought were your family weren't really there when you needed them most? Or maybe you found your real family in unexpected places. Your stories matter, and they help others feel less alone. This journey taught me that blood doesn't always make family, and family doesn't always share your blood. The people who show up, who choose to love you through the hardest moments, who celebrate your joys and carry you through your sorrows, those are your real family. If you found value in this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we deserve people in our lives who choose us, especially when we're at our most vulnerable. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more real stories about family, relationships, and finding strength in the darkest moments. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, because there are so many more experiences to share, and you never know which one might change your perspective or help you through your own challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, for allowing me to share this painful but ultimately healing journey with you. Remember, you deserve family who shows up. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, and sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of something so much better. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who truly matter in your life.